Hello, everyone, and welcome to Empowering the Conscious Business Evolution Talk with me, Antonina Manev, for some fresh, thought-provoking and liberating conversations about inspiring the sparks of innovation and evolution and growing a bigger and a wider world of ethically successful and consciously evolving business environment. For those who tune in for the first time, I'm the founder of NSPIRE Strategic Business Growth Consultancy. As a business strategist, my focus is on turning visions into profitable businesses, be it for startups or established businesses. So in my area of work, evolving the business consciousness is a key element. You can find out more about my inspiring work by visiting the website www.visionsinspire.com. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel or like my Facebook page or connect on LinkedIn with me. Business owners work with me, looking to increase usually their business cash flow and profits and create a secure financial future so they fully enjoy a greater lifestyle and balance. However, along the way, the main obstacle appears to be the uncomfortable mindset of conformity, which accepts limitations in business making and development, or even growing in order to fit in an old custom conventional framework of business making that holds them back, and all that at the expense of their true identity. But how we even start to break up these frames? Well, we'll have to try. In my interviews, video or audio, I will be introducing you to exceptional business leaders, owners, and creators who have reached great success in what they do, not because they worked hard to fit in, but by challenging the status quo and constantly innovating themselves and their businesses, by searching back to their authentic roots to follow the person, business, environment connection, and by taking approaches of consciously evolving to align with a higher social and earth value through their creativity, identity, and co-creative forward thinking. So be prepared, all my guests have left valuable tips and inspirational words of wisdom for you to take and do your best to outshine the conventional and grow yourself and business aligned with higher values. All their interviews are playing on the NSPIRE YouTube podcast channel. Happy listening and happy learning and growing. Welcome everyone to this episode of Empowering the Conscious Business Evolution with me, Antonina Manev, and my guest today is Victoria Reynoldsson, the founder of PURFECT Cuppa English. So cheers, Victoria.
Fantastic, thank you.
welcome and thank you, really. Thank you for coming to my channel today to share your experience and insights into how business evolution can be helped globally. So welcome and over to you. And can you please tell us more about yourself?
Of course. And Antonina, first of all, thank you so much for the lovely warm welcome and the lovely cuppa. Cheers there. So hello to everybody. My name is Victoria Reynoldsson. I'm a communication and culture coach. And what I do is I work with people all over the world in whatever they do in their business or if they're working in their career to be communication and culturally confident. And what do I mean by this? I mean that they can connect and communicate in a way which really builds up, what they're doing, their performance, building up their business and building up their impact in the world. So it really has a big result to what I do and what I do with my clients.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I'm going to get a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Now, in a world of very dynamic business exchange, very often success fails because broken down relationships. How cultural communication, the knowledge of cultural communication, plays a part here?
That's a great question, because, you know, people sometimes say to me, look, we live and work in this very international world, you know, particularly in the last few years where we've been all working virtually, right? We've been working through this kind of little rectangle of a screen, and we can connect with anybody anywhere super quickly, super easily. And it's almost like, well, business flows internationally more than ever it did, because we don't have to do it face to face anymore. I mean, obviously, it was always possible before to do it virtually, but even more so now. So we do live in this very globalized world where, it's kind of very much, we can grow our businesses however we want and in a very kind of clear way. However, if we don't really understand some of the kind of cultural influences that go on, then this might lead to some miscommunications, misunderstandings. And actually, it can be really subtle. It might be what's being said, but it might be what's not being said. It might be about the body language and nuances of things that you're not noticing, because obviously the other problem is the screen is quite small. So there are lots and lots of factors. And the way that I kind of like to describe it is, we see the world through our own pair of glasses. So imagine I'm wearing my pair of glasses.
Yeah.
And I kind of wear my glasses, you wear your glasses, somebody else wears their glasses. And we don't sometimes even realize we're wearing the glasses. They're so natural to us. They're part of our face, and we've always kind of worn them. And those glasses are kind of our values. They are our attitudes to life, our beliefs about life. But we kind of don't realize how national culture, the culture that's had the biggest influence on us, has really influenced that. So, if we see the world through our glasses and somebody does something unexpected, we might actually experience that as a bit strange, even in some situations as potentially rude or, a bit abrupt. So if I give you a really specific example,
yes.
In the
UK, give me an example.
Yeah. So
situation, you come across where exactly that difference of interpretation through the glasses actually damages something.
Yeah.
And how you or how your insights and training help them improve it. You can try it on me. I'm you can call me a different culture because I come from Eastern Europe. So
yes, of course.
And especially now Putin and what's happening here, misreading each other. That's so crucial. So you can yeah, go on.
Absolutely. So I think it comes down to, if I give you a great example, which I think might be kind of relevant, is that sometimes when people are working with, for example, with people in the UK, which is where I'm based in London, they find the style really of communication quite indirect. So there is an issue there in terms of feedback style. So let's imagine you're a business owner, you want to build your business in the UK, and you don't understand necessarily when a no is being said, because actually the person giving that no is being very indirect. So they're saying things like, I really love your idea. I love what you're doing here. I think it's really great. Maybe I just need a bit of time to think about it. Now, for some cultures, that's an amazing message. They're like, that was a yes. That was I absolutely, a done deal. I'm like, I've got this client, this is amazing. But actually, what you have to understand is that sometimes the British style of communication is very indirect, particularly with negative feedback, with saying no, disagreeing. And so that message, although it sounded very positive, could be an avoidance strategy. It could be, okay, I want to say no, but I'm not going to say it to their face. I'm going to email them later and say no. Or it could be that there is what I call the yes but technique, that I love what you're doing and I hear where you're coming from, but now in some cultures, actually the positive message, you would never hear such positive messages at the beginning. So actually people pay attention to the first part without even realizing it's the second part you need to pay attention to. Now, this is important to understand, you know, for two reasons. One, that obviously you have to understand it. So if you're building your business, you have to understand the messages and know how to decode them. But the other thing as well is, to be successful yourself, you have to have some decisions about when you want to adapt your own style to be more successful with the people you're working with. So there might be situations with communication where maybe you need to take a softer, more diplomatic approach than you're used to, because actually that's what the culture requires. So I work with a lot of Japanese clients, and that's fascinating, very, very fascinating, because again, you have to approach the communication in a particular way and think very carefully about the types of ways that you're expressing yourself. But when I work, for example, I've worked with Dutch clients. Dutch clients are, you know, the style of communication is very direct, to the point, but sometimes their clients experience them as too direct, even perhaps, you know, to the point, and actually they need to soften the style. So there's kind of, it's really about starting points, understanding your glasses, and then making conscious decisions. And that's really important, because insight by itself is not enough. You need to then kind of go, okay, what's my strategy here? What do I want to do? Am I going to bridge the cultural kind of gap and think about how I connect better with this person? What can I adapt in what I say? And what can I adapt in how I say it? So, you know, I think that's kind of really the approach that, you know, brings to life, I suppose. There's this idea of cultural communication.
Oh, that's so interesting. And you just managed to sum up so much into it. So I need to give it a thought. I need to unpack it, because it's amazing to understand how different factors actually play a huge part, and especially the English way of versing agreement or disagreement in the first and the second part. And I personally did struggle like 20 years ago when I landed here, and you know, trying to understand why people are British people. Now listen to that. Why British people are playing around the bush so much and playing ballet. What's the point?
Yeah, right. It's
why
really
waste of time? Just say, look, I like you very much. I like what you do. You have really great points, but just be direct. No, thank you. And this is met as rudeness here. This is interpreted as rudeness in the UK. Now,
well, that's an interesting point. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump in, because I really want to kind of build on this point. So yes, we sometimes interpret things in different ways, depending on, you know, the cultures we're interacting with. And at the same time, I can understand your frustration, because I hear that sometimes from my clients. They say to me, you know, I'm finding this deeply frustrating. I don't know where I stand. I don't know, you know, I find it hard to interpret what's really happening in this interaction, because this person's not being clear enough with me. So I sort of advise two things that you can do in this situation. So I think the first thing is, I always say to people, you know, if you're not sure, there's nothing wrong with clarifying. So it's very simple, but make sure you have a common understanding. And that's really important, because if you're building your business, you need to know where you stand, and you need to know, you know, what can you adjust to be more successful. So clarify. So say, you know, can I just check my understanding of this point, or can I just kind of rephrase that, make sure that I've got the key points. So clarifying is a really key technique, and we should never feel afraid or nervous of doing this in a situation. I think it's very, very important, so that we have a common understanding, so that we're on the same page. And then the second thing as well, which is quite an interesting way to approach this, I've talked about adapting our own styles to be more successful, but sometimes we don't want to adapt. Actually, we feel like, you know what, this is part of who I am. This is what I do. This is almost my personality. So in which case we frame what we are doing. So in your situation, you talked about being having a more direct style than you felt that some people you were dealing with had. So you could say to them, look, I'm going to give you some feedback, and just to frame this, I'm going to give this in a direct style because that's my natural way.
That's exactly what I learned to do.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Because this is the
permission.
point.
I ask permission. It is always much better when you share your intentions, as you say, you ask for permission to express in your own style, and then you check that they understand.
Absolutely, there. So I think this is really important, because this idea of asking permission, it sounds a bit submissive, but it's really not. It's about sort of saying, look,
Exactly.
you know what, I'm going to frame what I'm doing. And that helps people because they understand your intention, that your intention is not negative or rude or whatever it might be that they interpret through their glasses. They understand the intention is positive, and that you are somebody who communicates in this way. And that can be really helpful because they have information they didn't have before. And that allows them to, rather than jump to their assumptions and their conclusions, to open up their mind and actually really listen to you. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. We want people to listen to each other, to connect better, and actually have proper conversations and try and remove some of these assumptions and judgments that are going on. You know, if we don't really kind of understand those cultural dynamics that are happening.
You must become an advisor to the political parties at the moment.
Oh my goodness. that would be a job.
Definitely. No, definitely. Many people can learn a lot from the, and I'm speaking from the point of view of European. People have a lot to learn from the British way of communicating, and cheers to the perfect Cuppa English.
Well, that's a really fascinating point, because I think for me, the other thing is that I'm always really careful to kind of say, look, there is, in this world, when we talk about culture, we have to be really clear that there is actually no good or bad. There's no kind of like right or wrong way of doing things. There's just different ways of doing things.
Absolutely.
And I, you know, coming back to the politics point, I'm not sure I'd ever want to work with politicians or in politics. I think that would be quite hard work. But at the same time, you know, there's something interesting about, you know, realizing that we're not trying to make other people right or wrong, or ourselves right or wrong here. We're actually just trying to kind of connect better and have those conversations that are really more authentic, because we're kind of removing the assumptions and we're trying to kind of chat in a way which really, that we do understand what's going on, which is why, you know, this also connects to, you know, communication confidence, which is a huge area I help my clients with.
Yes.
It also connects to, even when I say communication, people often think about it as speaking, which of course it is. You know, I help people with their, whether it's introducing themselves in networking or doing videos or doing their presentations, but it's also about listening, and listening is a part of communication. And that's something people sometimes forget. It's not just about me kind of broadcasting and speaking, it's also the other way around as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I am.
So have you come across really broken businesses that you go and help them out, you know, to repair because of their communications?
Broken is probably quite a strong word. I mean, I'll be kind of honest. I've had sort of people come to me where they've kind of really struggled to connect with clients.
Okay, let's
so I'll give it. So they've kind of really struggled to understand how to build up their business. So, as an example, I was talking about Dutch people earlier. I was working with a Dutch team who were based in the Netherlands, but trying to build up their business in the UK. And we're really kind of finding it challenging to have the conversations, to get to the yes, get to people committing. And, you know, a lot of that was about sort of communication style, and being able to kind of, you know, find ways to kind of connect with their clients and to actually understand kind of how they can build the relationship. Now, you know, some of the things we talked about were communication based, but we also talked more broadly about things like British humor style. So the idea that, you know, the irony, the types of idioms that come into business, these are not obvious and clear necessarily. And you know, it sounds kind of very, if you're kind of native speaker of a language, you think, well, of course, I use these things all the time. I make a joke, or, you know, I kind of, you know, I'm sarcastic, but people don't get that necessarily. So, you know, we talked about this area. We also talked a little bit about the role of, this was a couple of years ago, just before COVID, but, you know, we talked a little bit about the role of going for drinks and how important that was, actually taking your kind of customer for drinks. Now, I know that sounds really basic, but actually, you know, there's something very important about going for drinks. You don't have to drink alcohol in this day and age. I don't think that we're that old fashioned, but there's a social glue that happens, a social connection that happens in the pub or, you know, wherever you're going for drinks, which is actually really, really important. So whether you're trying to build a business with people, you know, taking people for drinks is important. Whether you're developing a career within a company, again, going for drinks is seen as a really important way to get to know people and have that connection. So I'm very much about the kind of broader cultural context, as well as, you know, the communication style as well. And then helping people think about how are they projecting themselves, how are they speaking up and sharing what they do. Because the other thing that I find that happens is that sometimes people kind of almost feel limited. So they feel kind of daunted by the fact that English is their second, amazingly, their second, third, even fourth language. And they don't necessarily have the confidence to speak up in the way they want to share their voice, to share what they can do and all the brilliant things they can actually add value on. So, you know, within somebody's a business owner, for them that's very limiting, because it might be they're really keen to do something like this, you know, to be interviewed or go do a video or do a podcast. And they're just, or even something like networking can actually throw some people. They just find that very high pressure to sort of say, you know, a simple question, what do you do? For some people, it's like, oh, I don't know what to say to that. And they kind of either, you know, just can't answer it clearly, or they spend too long, you know, answering these questions. So, you know, I think this is important as well. And this is also something I'm very passionate about, is helping people to really release their voice and speak up, particularly if they're a business owner, and think about how they're getting their message out into the world and not to limit themselves. Now, that's about mindset, and I help people with that. And it's also about something I call communication agility, which is about a flexibility approach to communication.
Yes, that's the communication agility. I like that very much. I think I came across a video, very short video of your Wednesday wisdom.
Wednesday words. Oh, fantastic.
Wednesday words.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for going to watch that.
I love that. I love that. And these are short episodes, and everyone can, you know, just go to the Wednesday and hear something new that they can pay attention for the week, for example. Yes. You know, and just be more open. That's fantastic.
So you saw the one about the communication agility one recently. Oh, fantastic. That's great. Yeah, I mean, these Wednesday words, I actually only started those sort of recently in the last few months, but for me, it's really about, they're short, they're only sort of 10, 15 minutes, but the idea of it is to give, you know, a particular focus on a particular topic, some ideas, some tips, but also importantly, some ways of how can you implement this and make this sort of actionable, because that's what I'm about. I'm really about that sort of practical action. I don't really, you know, I don't want to be theoretical or to have, you know, ideas which are not very grounded in reality. And that's why actually, you know, my background is business. I started life in corporate life. And that was, you know, for me, when I moved into my space, I was like, right, this has to be very much about practical reality and making things, you know, really implementable for people.
How did you come about becoming what you are and what you do at the moment? how did that happen? What challenged you? Now pay attention. What challenged you in life or career or something to say, that's it, I'm going to do something different? Because what you're doing is something really different. Not many people do what you do, building those bridges.
I think that's a really, really great question. And I think I'll ask the question back. Do you want the short answer or do you want the long answer?
whichever will express and explain the transition possibly from the child Victoria, Victoria, the workforce in the corporate world, and Victoria today.
Fantastic. Okay, well, listen, let me wind back because it is important, and hopefully it is something as well that, you know, gives some inspiration and some kind of motivation for people as well.
Go for it.
So if I wind back to child Victoria, so, you know, what you need to know about me is that although I consider myself a confident communicator today, this wasn't always the case. I was actually quite shy, and I kind of felt through my my end of school days and the beginning of my career that I actually really, really didn't like standing up and speaking up. And for me, that was particularly about presenting. I was sort of okay in meetings. I didn't mind contributing, but I just didn't like presenting. I felt so anxious. I actively avoided it. Absolutely hated it if I was put on the spot in front of other people to speak up. So, you know, my first career, I started life in marketing. I worked, actually, if I go back even further, my root was languages. So, which is probably where the communication comes from, the idea of it. So I studied languages at university. I lived abroad for short periods of time in Germany and Russia. I then went into...
You were not a Russian spy, were you?
No, I wasn't.
No, okay, good.
Just to clarify, I'm not a Russian spy.
Just to clarify.
And then I started, you know, my first career, which was in marketing. And I started in healthcare, moved into the food industry. And it was quite interesting. I mean, marketing is also about communication. It's about communication to the consumer. So through advertising, through products that you launch, through the packaging, through all different aspects. And I love that career. I really enjoyed it. But, you know, what happened was, you know, I got to sort of, you know, a few years in, and I really couldn't avoid this anymore. I couldn't avoid not presenting, not standing up, because it was becoming increasingly part of my role. And I got to a new role in my mid-20s, and I had to stand up every single month in front of the sales team, 100 people, and present the plan. And the idea of it just absolutely, I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, you know, the first few times I was gritting my teeth. I was sweating, I was like blushing. That was my big thing. I used to turn bright red and I could feel the anxiety coming on. And I just got to a point, I was like, I've got to get through this. I've got to find a way to break this pattern because this is not helping me. It's holding me back. It's holding my career back. And I know I can do better than this. And that's quite critical because that also relates to how a lot of my clients think at the moment. They kind of realize they need to get through this idea to be successful, to kind of realize what they need to do. And there were a couple of things that really helped me. So the first one was act as if. So I kind of had this idea that if I could act as if I were a confident presenter, then it might make it a bit better. So I started putting on this acting role that I could do this. And I realized that actually that was starting to help a little bit. And then the other idea, which I found really helped me, was imagining what would it look like if I was successful. So before I even kind of, like the day before, I'd almost imagine and visualize it and go, okay, I can see myself standing there at the front, and I can see myself standing really strong, and I'm feeling calm and I'm smiling, and I can hear my voice. My voice is really steady and clear. And I can see the other people watching me and they're smiling and they're really interested in what I've got to say. And it was just visualizing this as well that massively helped me, because I was like, I was getting quite stuck in my head, in the voice in my head about, I've got to be perfect, got to get this right, got to get, you know, this is really important for my career. I've got to do this like absolutely amazingly. And that was also connected to, you know, my kind of childhood and career was all about being perfect, being the best, getting the best grades. And it just wasn't helping me. Actually, what I really needed to kind of get to was I need to be more flexible and actually not think so much about me in here, but think about them. Think about, you know, the people who are watching and listening to me, and getting them, you know, thinking about what do they need to hear, what's important to them. And, you know, actually, the more you focus on somebody else, you can't be distracted about also the voice in your head. You get much more about them. And that, you know, again, was another big learning for me. Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not like a switch. It didn't happen overnight. It took time. But this is another big point. I was forced into that situation, but boy, am I glad that I was. And that frequency meant that I got better and better all the time until, you know, eventually it was becoming much more second nature. So that was kind of the first evolution of my kind of confidence. But the other bit of it for me was that I then, you know, was working in these very large international organizations. And I was fascinated about sitting in these project team meetings and presentations where people were joining on calls from all over the world. I was based in London. And the way people were communicating was really interesting to me. So, you know, I noticed that although we make this huge assumption, English is the language of business and everybody should be able to communicate at the same level, just the reality is not like that. And actually what happens is the most confident communicators have the highest share of voice. They tend to dominate the meeting, and some people just don't get heard. And that's a real shame because those people have the expertise. And when I kind of noticed this, I call this the communication gap. And that was when I was like, do you know what? There's something here. There's something that's going on within this idea of international working, which is the communication gap. And it's about communication. It's also cultural. And it got me thinking that, you know, this is the insight, and that is the seed of my business. So, you know, that led me to think, you know, how do I kind of get into this space? And, you know, how did I leave corporate world? Well, you know, I think for me, I'd been in that career for 12 years. And I massively enjoyed that. I had fantastic development opportunities and opportunities for work and promotion opportunities. But I just kind of got to a point where I was like, do you know, I think I need something different. I need either a new challenge. It also combined with having a young family and thinking, well, I want something a bit different, whether it's flexibility or freedom, or I wasn't really sure what it was. But the idea of the communication gap was playing on my mind. And I thought, you know what? I can see a way to kind of bring this together. And that was fascinating for me because I never, ever expected to set up my own business. It just wasn't on my radar at all. So it was a real surprise to me to kind of go, okay, I'm leaving corporate life and now I'm moving into this. But I'm so glad I did that. And it, you know, I kind of left corporate life 9 years ago. It's Perfect Cuppa's 7th birthday this week as we're recording. So
Wow.
7 years of doing this.
Congratulations. Well done.
Oh, so I'm very excited by that. But it's, you know, amazing to me that this journey of, I set off into entrepreneurship. I didn't actually really know very much. It's funny, I knew a lot about business, but in the corporate world, I didn't know very much about running a business. But I think, you know, what I, you know, was in my favor is that I'm a great believer is you have a go at things. And then you have your, what I call the Dr. Pepper moment. So, you know, Dr. Pepper is the drink.
Yes.
And the advertising campaign from the 80s was, what's the worst that can happen? And I was just like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? This all goes horribly wrong. Well, I'll just go get another job somewhere else. Like, it's not a big deal. And I just had this idea about life generally, which is I don't take crazy risks, but I also kind of also am a bit like, you know, what is the worst that can happen? Now, I do know that I say this from a place of privilege from my point of view, in that I can ask myself these questions. You know, I do have enough, you know, to kind of ask that question of myself. But at the same time, I think sometimes we have to just kind of go, it's not this big thing we have to do. We just need to take one step forward try it out, see if it works. And if we like it, we take another step forward and then another one and so on. So there you go. That was a long story of how it came about.
I completely forgot the other questions that I wanted to ask you. No, seriously. That's so, and to great extent, your experience, I can relate to your experiences because I went through similar stages. And actually, Visions Inspire is now going to be 7 years as well.
Congratulations.
So,
What a coincidence. There you go.
But yeah, it is always scary, to jump from a secure job, a secure field of expertise into something that you just go along with your feeling and with your belief that that gap that you have spotted can actually become your niche that you have now very successfully developed and established. That's so inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm glad it is. And I think, from an entrepreneurial point of view, and thinking about business owners who might be listening to this, my feeling is that, it doesn't, things don't just happen. You sort of take steps along that journey. And the other thing that I'm a great believer in is keeping an open mind. So, my business wasn't like this 7 years ago. You go through different stages and it evolves. And, I think that's a really important part of this, right? Is being, having a plan, but then also just being a little bit open to what happens, both positive and negative. And then just, developing the business as you do that.
And be brave and trust your, as they call it, soul or inner voice, and just follow it. Because in many cases, the people that I come across with, I try to help them believe again in their uniqueness, in their authenticity, and try to find that little voice in them and start growing it so that become the one. Just before we push the button record, if you remember, we mentioned about boundaries in business, boundaries in you're kind of demolishing the boundary of communication between business, between other cultures and English culture. But this is one direction. How do you understand the English culture? Now, what is it that we can do as visionaries, that we can help other cultures learn how to break through other cultures, so that we can really begin in the new era of collaborative and co-creative business, so that we consciously elevate and go and step on the other step of evolution. Because I don't see businesses being closed up anymore, and ideas, and this is what the world in a way needs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there is a lot of, very established frameworks and models out there which can give you insights into how do different cultures interact with each other. And these are frameworks I use in my work. They are starting points for discussion, and clearly they're based on, some of them are, very, very well quantified research models, but clearly they only ever represent an average, and not every individual is an average. So, what I kind of, use them as starting points for conversations. This is a picture based on research, but what is your experience? What do you feel? Does this resonate or doesn't it? And I think that's quite important. Coming back to your question about, visionary business, I think it's really important to be curious and ask questions rather than making assumptions as well. So, the way that we often operate in this world is, at the moment particularly, is about, okay, let's be quick, let's be productive, let's be efficient, let's go back to back with all these meetings. But then we don't spend the time getting to know people and understanding exactly what's driving them. I mentioned listening earlier on. Listening is a key part of this,
Yes.
that we learn to listen to people and fully listen to them. It sounds really basic. We have 2 ears. We've been listening since we were babies, but I would argue that was hearing. For us to listen is a skill. And that requires attention, like real attention. And you need to indicate attention through things like your eye contact and your body language. You need to remove the distractions, remove the phone and anything else that isn't kind of working there and then. And you need to remove the mental distractions. You need to remove the what just happened in the last meeting, or what's coming later today, or that I'm hungry, or whatever it is that is in your head. So, we need to kind of get through this and be, thinking about how are we more, really visionary with our working across different cultures. We need to be listening to each other. We need to be curious, and rather than making assumptions, actually asking the questions to check and understand really, where is this person coming from? What do they actually need and want? What is going to help, to my message to land with them? And, how can I make sure that they, really, understand me as well? So, this is really, really important. And then I think, the other big thing that I'm coming up time and time again with my clients is, how can I really connect with different people from all over the world via this tiny little camera here and this like tiny space that I'm living in my little box? How do I well, quite, actually making time for that conversation. But there are, other things as well. People, are, really, yes, of course, they're tired of kind of video calls and Zoom and whatever it might be. But also, it's so important to have video on. This is such a critical point, because actually, if we can't see people, it's actually really difficult to connect in the same way. Now, I'm not saying you can't do audio only calls, but you can certainly mix it up. But video, being able to see the other person, is quite key. When I'm thinking about, how do I communicate with others? Again, here are just some very simple things, but things to really think about. So you may not, I don't know if you know, but I'm actually standing. And I'm moving a little bit like this. But, you probably notice my energy, and that's really important. Yes. So I do about 70-80% of my working time standing up. It's a very simple standing desk. It's just a stand that I've bought. It's not a fancy kind of electronic desk or anything. But this is important. So when I'm meeting clients, when I'm doing talks, interviews, events, I'm always standing, because that brings a totally different energy to what you do. And it really helps to connect via the camera. Other things that I tell people to do, it's really interesting, but when I'm speaking at events face to face, my body language, my hands are probably down more around my stomach area. But on Zoom, I have to bring my hands up here if I want to do people to see what I'm gesturing and what I'm actually emphasizing. So something that made me laugh was that when we started, I mean, obviously we've had various moments of lockdowns and out of lockdown. When I started doing more face-to-face meetings again, I suddenly realized 2 things. One, I was holding my hands up too high because I got used to the space. And the other thing, which I thought was really interesting, which I thought was for me, a really helpful insight, was my body language was too loud for face-to-face interactions, because I deliberately use my body language quite a lot in the virtual space. And I went back to face-to-face, and I suddenly realized I was being quite theatrical in my body language. And I realized I had to turn the volume down again for when I was face-to-face and bring my hands down. So that was an interesting kind of learning. But, I think, these are very simple things, but, how do we, the visionary kind of business owners you work with, that you reach out to, that connect with your community, how do we bridge these kind of cultures? How do we work internationally? I think we have to think about, how do we communicate and connect and really build a great conversation via our screens? And actually that takes planning and thinking about what we're doing with what we're saying, our voice, our body language, even, standing, and our breath, and how we're standing is so important in all of this.
these are brilliant tips you just gave. Now, my other question will be a little bit more business-like. So if someone who is listening to us wants to contact you and work with you to, to become better because they believe that they need that, and I'm sure that you will show them that they will need that. What is the process? What is the process for them to follow with you?
Sure. So in terms of working with individuals, I have a particular kind of program that I do, which is 9 steps to communication confidence. And that is basically, I mean, I won't go through all the detail, but it's made up of 3 key stages. So the first stage is all about clarity. So one of the things that I find is that probably like I was myself, a bit perfectionist, people get who are, very ambitious and want to do great things with their business or in their career, get quite perfectionist. So they kind of have quite a critical view of their communication and how they're doing today, which may not be realistic, may not actually be based on reality. So what I kind of help them do is give them clarity about where are you today? Where is your kind of where are your strengths, first of all, because that's important, but actually where do you need to work on? And that can be a bit of a surprise for people because they may not understand that. Clarity is also about exploring mindset, so helping people to understand, how are they approaching communication today? How are they approaching interacting with others? And I have a fantastic profiling tool, which I use with them, which is based on neuroscience, which is amazing to help people really understand how are they thinking, how is it they're approaching these interactions, and how is that influencing how they're communicating and connecting. So that's kind of all about clarity. Now, the next stage is communication agility, and we mentioned that earlier in this conversation. And what do I actually mean by this? Well, communication agility is really, for me, it's about, again, getting away from this perfectionism idea that actually, if you want to be a TED speaker, yes, of course, there is training. You can be the most perfect 100% TED speaker, but do TED speakers make mistakes? Yes, of course they do. Of course they do. And so, I call myself a confident communicator. I call myself a communication and culture coach. Do I make mistakes sometimes in my videos? Do I say and ah, and do I trip over my words? Of course I do, because that's realistic. And it's really important that communication isn't about being perfect. It's about being authentic. And you used that word earlier. And I really connect with that because, there was one client who came to me who said it so perfectly. She said, I just want to be able to communicate more like me. I want to just be more Sarah, is the way she said it. And I just thought, yeah, that's what it's about. That's the nugget, because at the end of the day, we just want to be ourselves. We want to be not a robot presenting or talking. We want to be ourselves. And so communication agility, coming back to, what I'm doing, is for me about helping people to kind of think about their specific situations. We build a personalized program based on what they need for their business, for their career. And we focus on that. We really think about, being very agile. How do we react? What happens if it all goes wrong? What if we have a challenging question or a challenging conversation? How do we deal with that? So for me, it's all about, having the flexible approach and many different approaches for doing something. And then the final part of my program is really about the fast track. So thinking about how do we implement this and make it part of daily life, because that's the important part. It can't live in the theory. It matters to me that people can implement this and actually start getting the results from it as well.
So these 9 steps are really going to help someone, for example, someone that I come across who have difficulties into going out and communicating themselves to the others and establishing those relationships. And I have had clients with those issues, specifically with these issues. And I can see how not only small businesses, but bigger firms, bigger corporations can expand their clients and their influence and the goodness of whatever they do to more across boundaries in a way. I think we are coming to near the end of our time today, but would you like to give one of your passions to share to people, like a message, like a blast of your message to people right now?
I love that. So listen, I'm going to cheat. I kind of call it, I do call it one thing, but I'm going to give you three things. Like if I was going to give like,
yes,
take three things from today. Okay. So the first thing is, get out of your own head and think about others. So it's not about you and, what you're worrying about yourself. Think about other people and think about what they need. So whether you're kind of dealing with a customer, with a large audience, you're trying to sell something or kind of connect to a potential customer, business development, really focus on the other people, because this will help you be better. You'll think about what they need and what they want and how to really connect with them. I think then the second thing is, what's the one thing? And I call it this, but it is a cheat because it could be several things. It could be 3 things or 4 things or even 5 things. But the point is, keep it simple. What is your key message or your key 3 messages that you want to really, really kind of land with the other person or people? And plan that. Have that in your head before you get into the conversation, the meeting, the presentation. That is so important because that keeps you focused and makes sure that you're talking about what you want to talk about. And then I think the final thing is, what we talked about later in this conversation today is be more you. At the end of the day, people connect with people. With your running your own business, people buy from people. Yes, you have something important to give, whether it's a service or a product. But at the end of the day, people will kind of come to you because you are who you are. So authentically show up, speak up, and people will kind of realize that you are either the right person for them or you're not. And that's totally good as well, because actually it means you are the right person for other people out there. So there you go. Hopefully that's probably not one thing, but that's 3 things.
No, I was going to ask for 3, but I thought, okay, now think about the others, focus on one key message and be more you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
So, Victoria, I know you're pressed with, you have your job to do. And just very quickly, where can people find you straight away?
Fantastic. Well, that's very kind of you to invite me to share that. So I share, the best place to connect with me is LinkedIn. So that's the place where I hang out the most. However, I am also sharing on Facebook and Instagram. So I'm sharing my, my tips every day of the week and strategies and various ideas, Monday to Friday. But as you mentioned earlier, I also have my Wednesday words. Yes. So do look out for that, because that's a video that I share. It's on my YouTube channel as well. And then finally, if it's okay, I really love to share a gift as well to the people watching and listening. Please. So I have, it's like an ebook, 8 Keys to Confident Communication, which is sort of an introduction, a precursor to my program. And that's totally free. So if people would like to download that, perhaps if I share the link with you, you could put that in the notes and they can download that as well. But that's a great start for anybody who's really curious about this topic and wants to discover more. But I personally also love having conversations. So feel free, if anybody from today has any particular questions or wants to reach out and has a particular problem and just wants to get perspective, I'm really happy to have a conversation with people. So I would love to connect.
And the free 8 key. That's fantastic.
Lovely.
Now, Victoria, thank you very much for gracing this show.
Oh, well, thank you.
with your presence, gifts, and the very, very valuable insight into communication. And I really hope that people who will be listening to us will draw lots of wisdom, how to communicate better themselves, how to understand others and not just judge and stop their development and evolution where they are. So come on, peeps, cross the fence. Right.
Well, thank you, Antonina. I really, really appreciate it as well. It's been lovely to join you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everyone. And listen to this wonderful episode with Victoria Reynoldsson. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And that was your inspiration to continue empowering your conscious business evolution today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope our conversations will help you take your own steps toward innovating and evolving as a conscious business by making choices for the benefit of people, communities, and environment. If you have any questions to my guests, I will leave their contact details in the description of this post. If you'd like to come to the show and share your wisdom, you're more than welcome. Please write to me to Antonina at visionsinspire.com. But definitely have a listen to all previous interviews and do subscribe to the Visions Inspire YouTube channel for my next show for more inspiration on being part of our conscious business evolution together. Please give Visions Inspire your like on Facebook and follow on Twitter and Instagram. And do share with others to listen, spread the word, grow the knowledge. That's the spirit of the conscious business evolution. Till next time, from me, Antonina Manev, your business growth strategist, turning visions into profitable businesses, and always here to empower the conscious business evolution. Thank you, and till next time.